My $5,000 suit couldn't hide my arrogance, but it certainly couldn't save me when my life ended up in the hands of the man I'd just publicly humiliated. The air in the first-class lounge was thick with the scent of entitlement and expensive cologne. It was my natural habitat. I'd clawed my way up from nothing to a corner office overlooking Manhattan, and these little luxuries, the free champagne, the quiet hum of success, were the spoils of war. My suit was Italian, my watch was Swiss, and my patience was razor-thin. I was flying to London for a multi-million-dollar merger, and a 2-hour flight delay was already putting a serious dent in my meticulously planned schedule. I tapped my fingers impatiently on the marble tabletop, a rhythmic beat of pure irritation. That's when I first saw him. He was standing by the large window overlooking the tarmac, dressed in a way that screamed, "Lost." Faded jeans, a simple gray hoodie, and a pair of worn-out sneakers that had probably seen better days. He looked completely out of place, like a pigeon that had wandered into a peacock enclosure. He wasn't on his phone or typing furiously on a laptop like the rest of us. He was just watching the planes. There was a calmness about him that for some reason annoyed me even more than the delay. When the gate agent finally announced boarding, a collective sigh of relief filled the lounge. I grabbed my leather briefcase and made my way to the priority lane, expecting to be among the first to board. And there he was again, hoodie guy, standing right at the front of the Group 1 line. I felt a surge of indignation. This was a classic case. Someone who'd clearly bought the cheapest economy ticket trying to sneak on early, hoping no one would notice. I'd seen it a dozen times. It messed up the whole system, the whole carefully constructed order of things. I cleared my throat, loud enough for him to hear. He didn't turn. I stepped closer, my $5,000 suit feeling like armor. "Excuse me," I said, my voice dripping with forced politeness. "I think you might be in the wrong line." He turned slowly, and for the first time, I got a good look at his face. He was a black man, probably in his late 30s, with kind eyes that held a hint of amusement. He didn't look offended, just curious. "Oh," he said, his voice a low, calm baritone. "I'm pretty sure this is the flight to Heathrow." "Yes, it is," I snapped, losing my patience. "But this is the Group 1 boarding line, first class." I gestured vaguely at his hoodie. "Economy is back there. They'll call your group in a little while." I even gave him a patronizing little smile, as if I were doing him a huge favor by pointing out his mistake. A few people in the line behind me were starting to watch. The man just looked at me, then at his boarding pass in his hand, then back at me. A slow smile spread across his face, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I appreciate your concern," he said smoothly, "but I know where I'm supposed to be." My face flushed with heat. He was calling my bluff. Now I looked like the jerk. "Look," I said, my voice rising. "There's no need to be difficult. We're all tired and want to get on the plane. Just go to the back of the line where you belong." The gate agent looked over, her expression weary. Before she could intervene, the man simply held up his boarding pass for me to see. Printed in bold letters were the words, "Seat 1B, first." My stomach dropped. He wasn't just in first class, he was sitting right across the aisle from me. The silence that followed was deafening. He didn't gloat. He just gave me a single, pointed nod, as if to say, "We're done here," and turned back towards the gate. I felt the burn of a dozen pairs of eyes on me as I shuffled forward, my triumphant moment turning to ash in my mouth. I spent the next 20 minutes fuming in my plush leather seat, 1A. I ordered a glass of champagne the moment I sat down, trying to wash away the humiliation. Who did that guy think he was? Probably won the ticket in some contest or cashed in a lifetime of credit card points. He didn't earn it. He didn't belong here. I watched as he settled into seat 1B, not even looking my way, just politely thanking the flight attendant who offered him a drink. He asked for a water. A water. The nerve. The cabin door was sealed, and the lead flight attendant began her safety demonstration. I put on my noise-canceling headphones and closed my eyes, determined to forget the whole embarrassing episode. Just as I was starting to relax, a crisp, authoritative voice came over the intercom, cutting through the music in my headphones. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and a warm welcome aboard Flight 101 to London Heathrow. Apologies for our departure delay. We're expecting to make up most of that time in the air. The voice was familiar, deep, calm, and impossibly smooth. My eyes shot open. I looked across the aisle at seat 1B. It was empty. My head whipped around towards the front of the cabin just in time to see the cockpit door closing. But not before I saw him. The man in the hoodie. He wasn't wearing it anymore. He had on a crisp white pilot's shirt with 4 gold stripes on each shoulder. As the door clicked shut, the voice came over the intercom again, a little warmer this time, with an unmistakable hint of amusement. "This is your captain speaking. We're just waiting for final clearance from the tower. So please sit back, relax, and for the passenger in seat 1A, try to enjoy the flight." The blood didn't just drain from my face, it felt like it evaporated. The entire first-class cabin, which moments ago had been a sanctuary of privilege, was now a high-altitude prison cell, and I was the star inmate. The amused chuckles from the passengers behind me were like tiny, sharp needles pricking my ego. I shrank into my seat, wishing the plush leather would swallow me whole. For the next 7 hours my life was in the hands of a man I had publicly tried to humiliate based on nothing more than the clothes he wore. The irony was so thick, I could have choked on it. The plane took off smoothly, a testament to the skill of the man in the cockpit. But to me, every slight dip and bank felt personal. Every rumble of the engines sounded like a low, resonant laugh at my expense. I tried to open my laptop, to lose myself in the spreadsheets and contracts for the London merger, but the numbers just swam in front of my eyes. All I could see was his calm, smiling face at the gate. All I could hear was his voice over the intercom, singling me out. It was a masterclass in revenge, subtle, public, and utterly devastating. He hadn't raised his voice, he hadn't insulted me back. He had simply let my own arrogance be my undoing, and then put an exclamation point on it from the cockpit. About an hour into the flight, a flight attendant approached my seat. She was the lead attendant, the one who had been at the gate. She leaned in, her smile professionally perfect, but her eyes holding a glint of something else knowledge. "Mr. Harrison," she said, keeping her voice low, "the captain would like to offer you a bottle of our Dom Perignon with his compliments." I stared at her, my mouth dry. This was a new level of psychological warfare. A peace offering, or another turn of the screw. Accepting it felt like admitting defeat, a tribute to my new overlord. Refusing it would be a petulant, childish move that would only make me look worse. He had me completely cornered. "Thank you," I managed to choke out, the words tasting like ash. "That's very generous." She returned moments later, presenting the bottle with a flourish, before popping the cork with a soft thwomp. As she poured the golden liquid into a fresh flute, she leaned in again, almost conspiratorially. "Captain Evans is one of our best," she said, her voice barely a whisper. 20 years with the Air Force before he came to us. Flew in combat zones. He says you can tell a lot about a person by how they handle a little unexpected turbulence." She gave me a pointed look, placed the glass on my tray table, and walked away without another word. The champagne sat there, untouched. Her words echoed in my head. Combat zones. Unexpected turbulence. It wasn't a threat, not directly. It was worse. It was information. Information designed to tell me exactly who I had messed with. This wasn't some guy who won a lottery ticket. This was a man who had faced life and death and wasn't impressed by my Italian suit. I was a gnat, and I had just tried to bite a lion. For the next few hours I was a wreck. I feigned sleep, but behind my closed eyelids I replayed the scene at the gate again and again, each time feeling a fresh, hot wave of shame. I imagined worst-case scenarios. What if he decided to take the scenic route through a thunderstorm? What if he accidentally dropped the plane a few thousand feet just to watch me squirm? My carefully constructed world, built on power and control, had been dismantled by a man in a grey hoodie. We were somewhere over the Atlantic when it happened. There was a sudden, violent lurch that felt completely different from normal turbulence. It wasn't a shake, it was a sickening drop, like an elevator cable snapping. A collective gasp filled the cabin. My untouched champagne glass slid off the tray and shattered on the floor. Alarms, faint at first, began to chime from the direction of the cockpit. The fasten seatbelt sign flashed on with an aggressive, insistent ding. The flight attendants, who had been calmly clearing dinner service, froze, their professional smiles vanishing, replaced by masks of genuine concern as they scrambled to secure the carts and get to their jump seats. The plane shuddered again, a deep, groaning noise coming from the right side, a sound that felt fundamentally wrong. The cabin lights flickered once, twice, then stabilized. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat of pure terror. Then his voice came over the intercom again. The calm, amused tone was gone. It was replaced by something I recognized from her description, the voice of a commander in a combat zone. It was sharp, controlled, and utterly devoid of emotion. "This is your captain," he said, his words cutting through the rising panic in the cabin. "We have an emergency. We've lost pressure in engine 2 and are shutting it down. We need to descend immediately." There was a brief pause, just long enough for the full weight of his words to sink in. Then he said the 5 words that turned my blood to ice. "Cabin crew, brace for impact." The words, "brace for impact," are not something you ever expect to hear outside of a movie. They are clinical, terrifying, and final. Panic, raw and primal, erupted in the cabin. There were screams, prayers, the frantic clicking of people trying to text last goodbyes. The flight attendants' voices were sharp, authoritative, shouting instructions. "Heads down, stay down, grab your ankles." I was frozen. My multi-million-dollar merger, my corner office, my Swiss watch it, all meant less than nothing. In that moment, I was just a man in a metal tube, falling out of the sky, about to die because of a bad engine. The descent was brutal. It felt less like flying and more like a controlled crash, a desperate battle against gravity and failing machinery. Through the window I could see the right engine, silent and dark against the deep blue of the Atlantic. The plane bucked and groaned, a wounded beast being expertly guided by an unseen hand. And in the midst of my own terror, a strange thought broke through. The man I had belittled, the man in the hoodie, was the only thing standing between me and a watery grave. His calm, his focus, his years of training in combat zones. My life was entirely dependent on the very qualities I had been too arrogant to see. I don't know how long we fell. It felt like an eternity. I finally uncurled from my terrified ball, pressing my face against the cold window. Below us, I saw it. A splash of green in the endless ocean. An island. It wasn't just any island. I could make out lights. A runway. He was going to try and land us. The sheer impossibility of it was staggering. He wasn't just flying a crippled plane. He was aiming for a needle in a haystack in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. The plane leveled out, the descent becoming less of a fall and more of a glide. The landing gear lowered with a gut-wrenching clunk. The flight attendants were shouting again, a rhythmic chant of, "Brace! Brace! Brace!" I squeezed my eyes shut, my knuckles white as I gripped the armrests. I braced for the screech of tearing metal, for the violent, final impact. Instead, there was a hard jolt. Then a second, followed by the deafening roar of reverse thrusters and the scream of tires on pavement. We were down. We were on the ground. The plane veered hard to the right, skidding toward the edge of the runway, but it slowed, shuddered, and finally came to a complete, miraculous stop. For a moment there was absolute silence. Then an explosion of sound, sobs of relief, applause, cheers. We were alive. We were alive because of Captain Evans. Emergency vehicles with flashing lights were already racing toward us. The doors were opened, and we evacuated onto the tarmac of what turned out to be a military airbase in the Azores. We stood there, a huddled, shaken group of survivors, wrapped in blankets and staring in awe at the massive plane, its right engine blackened and smoking. It was hours before things settled down. We were taken to a hangar, given food and water, and checked by medics. Through it all, I kept looking for him. Finally, I saw him near the cockpit of the damaged plane, talking to a group of military officials. He was no longer in his pilot's uniform. He was back in the gray hoodie and faded jeans. When he finished, he walked away from the group, His shoulders slumped with exhaustion. He wasn't looking for praise or accolades. He was just a man who had done his job. I knew what I had to do. I walked over to him, my legs still shaky. He saw me approaching, and his face was unreadable. There was no amusement, no anger, just a profound weariness. "Captain Evans," I started, my voice hoarse. I trailed off, the words I had rehearsed, the apologies, the explanations, suddenly feeling hollow and inadequate. He just looked at me. "It's Marcus," he said, his voice quiet. "Just Marcus." "Marcus," I said, taking a breath. "What I did at the gate, there's no excuse for it. It was arrogant and it was ugly. I judged you and I was completely wrong. You're a hero. You saved all of our lives today, including mine." I finally met his eyes. "And I am truly, deeply sorry." He held my gaze for a long moment, and I saw a flicker of the man from the lounge, the calm observer. He gave a slow nod. "Apology accepted," he said. He then gestured back toward the plane. "You know that suit you're wearing? It doesn't make you a good or bad person. And this hoodie doesn't either. They're just clothes." He looked me straight in the eye. "It's what you do when the engines fail that shows who you really are." He didn't need to say anything else. I stood there on that remote runway, the smell of jet fuel in the air, a humbled man in a $5,000 suit that suddenly felt like a cheap costume. The London merger could wait. My old life, the one built on status and superiority, felt like a distant memory. I had been given a second chance, not just at life, but at being a better man. And I owed it all to the pilot in the hoodie.